Welcome to In the Funnel. My name is Mark Cox. In the Funnel is a group of sales coaches and consultants that help B2B sales teams dramatically improve revenue. Clients come to us when revenue growth is stagnated, or their sales team is not meeting expectations, or they need to recalibrate their sales and go-to-market plan for the upcoming year. Our clients have enjoyed tremendous success working within the funnel, and please hear it straight from them by listening to the testimonial section of this website. What they'll tell you is there's two things that make us unique and different in our space. Number one, we have a process and a methodology. First, for understanding your current state, and then second, for building your sales and go-to-market plan for the upcoming year. The second thing that makes us unique and different is that everybody within the funnel has run a material sales organization in their recent past. We're all practitioners. We don't have any theorists or teachers, and what that means is we can get in front of your sales team and run the next sales meeting, or join them on their next sales call to close your next large prospect. All of us have a passion for professional, disciplined, process-driven sales, and we'd be delighted to talk to you if you're looking to grow revenue for your company. Please feel free to reach out to us through this website at info@inthefunnel.com or by telephone. Thanks for taking the time to watch this.
One of the real keys, and it's not as obvious, but the three story sale skills are building a story where you've got the components of a setting, a struggle, an aha, an insight, and an outcome deliverable just with bullets and keywords in less than 60 seconds.
Okay.
So you have to be able to build a story, then tell it in 60 seconds. But then what I ended up doing intuitively back in 1974, where after I gave you my 1-minute materials manager story, I'd say, Mark, enough about me, what's going on here? And then for the next 45 minutes, I tend your story. And so what I have to do is start gathering nuggets and putting them into the narrative stories that are going to help you buy.
Hey team, there are just a handful of what I would call legends in professional sales today. And I define a legend as, maybe a theorist who has written a number of outstanding books where the processes, the best practices, the methodologies were based on research and facts, and they've stood up over the test of time, in some cases decades. And we've had a lot of those guests on the podcast. There's other legends in professional sales where they've lived a life as a practitioner, running large sales organizations, running large training groups. They've done it over decades. David Fausner and I are so super excited for today's guest because Mike Bosworth, he's both. He's one of these people who actually was a practitioner. In fact, you've heard us reference Neil Rackham's been selling multiple times on the show. The original group that research was based on was Mike's team at Xerox. So just amazing experience in terms of that he shares today working with Dr. Rackham and doing that original spin selling research. And then in 1983, Mike founded Solution Selling as a company, and he wrote a book called Solution Selling, Creating Buyers in Difficult Selling Markets. That book became legendary. And by the way, you think of those times, a big recession, 1991, 92. So creating buyers in difficult selling markets, really relevant then. And by the way, very relevant today in 2023. In 2003, Mike authored a second book with John Holland called Centric Selling, also became legendary. These are two almost standards along with spin selling and strategic selling. Aligning strategy and sales from Frank Cespedes. These would be on our books of, top 10 sales books of all time, top 15 books of all time. We have a great conversation today with Mike. And one of the things that becomes so evident is these fundamentals that are so important for professional salespeople today, they were the fundamentals from 10 years ago and 20 years ago and even 30 years ago. So every generation needs to hear this message in language that will resonate for them. But our ability to interact with buyers, help them understand a better future for them and their business and a better desired business outcome, and have a strategic, value, client-centric approach to working with them to get there has never changed. That's always been the way to sell better. And today we get it from really one of the original architects, Mike Bosworth. Just a fantastic conversation. And again, one of the reasons I love doing this podcast so very much. Now, I bet you're going to love this podcast here today, and I really hope you do. So if you do, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast. That really matters to us. And tell your friends about the podcast. We want to help everyone out there sell better. We want to improve the lives of salespeople, and we want to improve the performance and professionalism of B2B sales. But we need reach to do that. And we get that reach when you share this with your teammates on the sales team, or you share it with the team that reports to you, or your network. And thank you for doing all of those things. Why don't you just sit back and enjoy Mike Bosworth? Here it comes. Hey, Mike, welcome to the show. What a pleasure it is to finally meet you.
It's a pleasure to be here as well, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure. And as always, I'm joined by my partner in crime here, David Fauser. David, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Mark. Thank you very much. Happy to be here with Mike. Really excited.
Well, we're super excited to chat with you, Mike, because we're about, at this point in time, we're about 60 podcasts in with the Selling Well. And we're always so amazed at the caliber of sales thought leader that actually agrees to join our podcast. I'm always surprised and frankly, just delighted. And I wanted to meet you for some time because really, after 30 to 40 years, you are an absolute legend in this sales enablement industry. So many great questions and thoughts I want to pick your brain on today, but maybe for our listeners, maybe you can just give us a little bit on your journey in professional sales. I know it's been a great story, but give us the short story of your amazing journey in professional sales.
Well, it'll have to be the short version because it can go long very easily. we don't need it to do that, but I grew up hard, didn't really have much nurturing, and ended up spending 13 months in Vietnam in the war.
Wow.
And during that war, they had a early IBM computer system they had shipped over to Vietnam to keep track of the officer inventory for the country.
Okay.
So whenever an officer come into inventory, we, when are you getting here and when are you supposed to go back, and all that stuff. And they're trying to automate it. It was a punch card computer system, and I ended up running that thing for the whole year I was there. So coming back from Vietnam, I wrote IBM a letter and I said, I've just run this computer system, one of your computer systems for a year. I want a job. And they said, Mike, we think you should go to college. And so I got back from Vietnam, and my sister got me into Cal Poly, and I ended up going to college and on the GI Bill, and majored in marketing, whatever it was back then.
Right.
And then I got recruited on campus by Xerox Computer Services in 1972. Xerox Computer Services was founded in 1969 by Jim Campbell, and they invented cloud computing. So in 1969, we had a central computer in Los Angeles. It was only in Los Angeles then. We had 50 local clients, either local governments like City of Pasadena, City of El Segundo, manufacturing companies, distribution companies, and and we did their general ledger, payables, receivables, order entry. It was all real-time transaction processing. Every enter was 2 cents. We charged them for every print line they printed. either on our high-speed printers or on their dumb terminals. And in storage, we charged them for the amount of room their data took in our computer. And they had a job in 1972 that was so shitty, none of their experienced people would take it. And so I was the first person out of college hired by this startup version of Xerox called Xerox Computer Services.
Whoa.
And the reason was they needed somebody on the help desk. They had all these 50 customers out there pounding the system all day long, and they were getting stuck in batches and couldn't find their information, and the payroll wouldn't run at night. And so I ended up going through 6 weeks of product school, and then I sat on that red phone for a year. And then I went out for another year in the field, and I got to meet all these people I'd been servicing.
How fun would that have been? After being on the inside for a year, getting out of the office and being in front of them, that's where the energy would come from.
Oh yeah, and it was, except the one funny thing that I kept hearing time and time again was, "Oh, Mike, we thought you were taller." But anyway, I guess I sounded taller on the phone.
There you go.
So after 6 months of that, now I had a pretty low opinion of salespeople, because every single client I had back then, the salespeople, the product was so complex that the time to solution expertise was just way long. You know, we had a lot of pre-sales support people, but the salespeople were saying, "Oh, it'll do that. Yeah, it'll do that."
Over promising and under delivering.
Vaporware. They were selling, making commitments that the product would do it, and then it wouldn't. So I'd go and clean up the mess.
Okay.
Then after 2 years, they asked me to go into sales. And I had two answers: no and hell no. Because I was the guy working 50 hours a week. They were going home. The salespeople were going home, driving BMWs, going home early and stuff. And, you know, I was getting called in the middle of the night to run their payrolls and stuff like that. And so I just had a whole problem with the way they were overpromising.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is my violent alcoholic father was a salesman. And the last thing I ever wanted to do in the world was to be like him. So I said no to going into sales. And they came back and said, "Let us take away your risk. We think you'd be good at it. We'll give it to you in writing. You can try sales for 6 months. You can keep your techie salary. You don't have to drop to the seller base.
Right.
At the end of 6 months, if you hate it, you can have your old job back."
Oh, they must have loved you even back then.
Well, the thing is I had unique knowledge back then that nobody else had, because everybody who joined Xerox Computer Services from 1969 on, regardless of job title, had to go through 6 weeks of product school. It was really demo school.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't, even though they'd hire all these ex-star IBM salespeople, because our CEO came from IBM. Our CEO, Jim Campbell, by the way, if you want to get into this a little later, he was Ross Perot's sales manager at IBM.
Wow.
No kidding. Oh, here we go. Now we're getting into some
There's a couple of fun stories about Ross Perot too. But anyway, you couldn't graduate, you couldn't make a sales call, you couldn't leave product school until you could demo every application, right? So after 6 weeks of product training, the new former star IBM salesperson goes out on his first sales call. What's the only thing he knows how to do? Offer a demo.
Right.
"Oh, Mark, can I show you a demo? Would you like to see a demonstration of our general ledger system or our material control system or whatever?" And I didn't have to do that. And I didn't even think of doing it, because I knew how to go out into any of those 50 businesses and help them solve a problem where they help them do their job better using my product than they could have done their job without my product.
So Mike, if we hold there for 1 second, I think this is just such an important point. 1972, people coming out just pitching demos.
Yeah.
I went through my training, similar training, 1992.
Mhm.
Similar thing. By those days, Xerox had a university to do this in Leesburg. So
Right.
did Kodak. And I went down to
Yeah.
literally a university Kodak setup. It was awesome. Demo.
Demo.
And everyone listening to this podcast knows you're getting trained to immediately trigger demos as part of your SaaS sales process. And it's a complete mistake.
It's a complete, utter disaster mistake.
Oh,
But see, I didn't know the right way except intuitively. And I spent the next 40 years figuring out how to teach salespeople what I did intuitively. But so here what the difference was. The only thing I didn't know how to do when I went into sales was cold call. And my first line manager was a, former IBM salesperson. And back then you didn't cold call on this. Back then you smokestack. You go into the knocking on doors. You go into an industrial park, and our manufacturing people would give us a list of all the manufacturing companies they wanted us to call on that were the right SIC code, had the right number of employees, etc. So I'd go knock, go in and walk up to the receptionist. Now at this time, I'm 28 years old, and it was always a she. And I'd say, "Hi, my name is Mike Bosworth. I'm with Xerox Computer Services, and I would like to speak with your materials manager." And they'd invariably pick up the phone, and it was always a he back then. There were no female materials managers back there. And she'd say to him, "I've got this guy from Xerox who wants to talk to our materials manager." And 80% of the time they'd come out. And I just think about that.
Wow.
That if you're cold calling. Why? Well, back then, and that was 1974 now when I was banging on doors. If you were a manufacturing executive and you'd been majored in industrial engineering or whatever, now you've been out of college 20, 25 years, the only way back then you could learn anything about new technology coming down the pike for manufacturing was to see salespeople.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
You'd see the salesperson from IBM or Honeywell or Xerox or whatever. So that curiosity brought them out 80% of the time. But remember, I was 28, he's 48, and invariably he'd walk up, and as soon as he'd look at me, he'd go like this and look at his watch.
Look at his watch.
Yeah, because he said, "Oh God, I came out here,
Too
I got
young.
hooked. Now
You
I
don't
have
know
to
anything."
fight for the next 10 or 15 minutes to this kid who doesn't know anything." Right? But so I'd confirm the job title, and then I'd say, and here was the secret sauce that it took a long time to figure out. I'd say, "So you're the materials manager here. Can I share a quick story with another materials manager I've been working with less than a mile from here for the last 18 months?"
Storytelling.
Offering that story. No one ever turned down that offer of a peer story. If you think about it, try it next time you're on an airplane. You're sitting next to, if I was sitting next to you, David, on an airplane, and I said, "David, what do you do?" What would you say?
Oh, I'd say I'm the director of sales.
I'd say, "Oh, can I share a quick story with you about another director of sales I've been working with for the last 4 years?"
I'd say absolutely. I would be so interested. Yeah.
Pure curiosity is the way to pop open a bicycle. Because in the B2B world, they're all curious about their peers. So, right? So he'd say yes to the story, and the 10-second offer of a story granted me 60 seconds of story time. But only 60, because you can't go in, no matter how good your story is, you can't go up to a stranger and just start expecting them to pay attention to your story. So anyway, he would say yes, and then I'd give him a quick synopsis of Well, the materials manager I'm talking about is Ed Blackman. He works for LPAC Electronics, less than a mile from here. I met him 2 years ago when my boss at Xerox made me join American Production and Inventory Control Society. Ed's the president of the local chapter. And when I met Ed 18 months ago, he had a really hard job. Whenever he come in the morning, his CFO was sitting at his desk half the time, pissed at him because he was carrying too much inventory. And his boss, the VP of manufacturing, was pissed at him because his past due backlog was 28%. But 18 months ago, when Ed discovered that Xerox had new technology, first, cloud computing, which I didn't mention, but
Think of that, 72.
70. Yeah, actually, that was 74 when I was making that call, but it was 72 when they hired me. And I said, so when Ed Blackman discovered 18 months ago that Xerox now had a way, even though he has 50,000 components in his product, that we could replan his entire plant overnight, he decided to be our first customer. We had no existing customers back then, but there was enough potential value that he decided to take the risk. Here we are 18 months later. His inventory used to be 8 million, now it's 2.7 million. His past due backlog used to be 28%, now it's 3%. But enough about me, what's going on here?
Boom. Then you're going to get,
Boom.
yes, you're going to get actually the response tells you everything you need to know. Because you've set up a nice little opener there. I'm either going to go, that's not that interesting to me, I'm already at 1.5 million backlog, or
Sure.
I got to learn more.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm going to go one of two ways
One of two
after that
ways.
conversation. And you were speaking in KPIs that matter to him.
Yeah.
And no one talked about whatever this technology does because
No.
nobody cares.
No.
They just
So
care what it does for them.
What invariably he would say, this is 60 seconds after he looked at his watch. He'd say, you want to come in and look around? And he'd take me in, give me a 45-minute tour of his plant. And in my first 5 months in sales at Xerox Computer Services at the age of 28, I sold more than anybody in the history of the company had sold in a full year.
Wow.
Without ever mentioning the D word.
Right.
Right? Because if you think about it, if you're leading with demos, then you're relying on the person watching the demo to be smart enough to figure out how to take those 100 features you're showing, pull out the 3 that really mean something to that person where they can apply it to themselves. It's crazy. The purpose of the product should not be to educate or
it's not to solution. They can't solution. Yeah. That's your discovery. And by the way, I like so many things about that story, Mike. And by the way, I like the rest of your story. So which we're going to touch on in a second. But I think there are nuggets, like we have the podcast so people can grab nuggets and apply them to them in their business and their industry tomorrow. And whether we're a product-centric company, we're selling a product, whether a technology or a SaaS company selling that, it doesn't matter what the product is. It doesn't actually matter. The only thing that matters is what is it going to do to help that person I'm speaking to have a better future in some way, shape, or form.
That's right.
A better outcome somehow. How do we help them? Whatever it is we do in the background, how do we help them get to a better future?
Well, the biggest problem in the B2B area is product marketing, because they're messing up the minds of not only new salespeople with too many product features, but they're screwing up the buying process for their customers. Can I tell you a quick little story that opened up everything for me on this subject?
Please.
So I used to do most of my solution selling workshops are for private clients, but about 6 times a year, I do a public workshop. And so I'm doing a public workshop in Del Mar, California, early 90s probably. And I'm going around the room, had 24 people at the U, had 8 at the back to be role play coaches, and I'm going around asking everybody what they sell.
Mhm.
And 98% of the people who come to my workshops are selling conceptual, intangible, perceived as expensive, B2B, sold to a committee, risk averse, all the high difficulty stuff.
Mhm.
And I get around to this one guy, Richard, and I said, Richard, what do you sell? And he says, Mike, I sell glue. And I said, dang, I have never had a glue salesperson go through one of my workshops before. And then as I made the next request, I wanted to grab the phrase and the words and shove them back in my mouth. But I said, tell me about the glue. Well, turns out he had a master's in chemical engineer from MIT. He was selling industrial adhesives, and he started, if you ask an engineer to tell you about the glue, get ready for the whole answer, right? Started going off about bonding and vibration and mold and high temperature flux. And finally, I'm looking around the room and everybody's eyes are rolling up in their heads. And I give him the timeout. And I said, Richard, it sounds to me like you're using that word glue as a noun. Could you change that word to a verb and tell me about your product? All he had to do, and he went from the glue to the gluing his clients do. So in other words, that became the theme for product marketing after that. Don't teach nouns to customers and new salespeople. Teach them verbs. Make the product a verb, not a noun. It's how they use it. And just like that story I told Ed Blackman, I told him those materials match. I told them a story about how Ed Blackman used our MRP system to replan his plant overnight. It had nothing to do with the demo or anything. So it's really customer usage, and product marketing is the enemy of sales productivity and buyer productivity, because product marketing, their source of power in the organization is their knowledge of the product. And every organization needs product experts. But the product experts shouldn't be teaching all our new salespeople how to do demos, and the product experts shouldn't be doing 100 feature presentations for potential customers. It's crazy.
I got a question for you, Mike. I'm just really curious here. How successful do you think you would have been had you had not spent that year on the help desk?
Never. Because I was young, I had no business experience. And if all I would have known how to do was do the demos that the guys I went to product school with, most of them washed out in the first 6 to 9 months because they weren't selling anything.
Yeah, it's interesting. Mark, what this reminds me of, it's basic good stuff here from the 70s, what Mike did, but it's what all the books talk about now that we should be doing. But it reminds me of the story that I told you about, that we had a podcast about, where I spent the 3 days on the front line at one of our customers. And I'll tell you, Mike, I've been in this business for 20 years, and by actually physically doing the work that our customers do, I was able to get so many insights. And I was actually sort of getting excited as you were talking, because I could still relate to that insight that you had. So by the time you got to these guys, you weren't afraid of them. You knew what they were all about. You knew what their problems were going to be, and you spoke their language. I think it's a brilliant story, just by chance, I guess. But from what you're saying, right?
And then I made my fortune by figuring out how to teach salespeople to do that. I ended up in 1979. Once I was the number one salesman in the company, for the next 6 years before I left Xerox, 5 to 7 weeks a year, I'd do sales training. Just come out of the field as a branch manager or region manager, whatever. And so I really started enjoying and getting good at sales training. And I decided in 1983 to go out on my own. and do it. But in 1979, what really got me thinking about sales process was after Xerox asked me to do sales training. Do you ever hear of the course Professional Selling Skills?
Yes.
PSS?
Yes.
Okay.
PSS.
That was the predecessor to Spin at Xerox.
Yes. Yes.
And that course was so successful that Xerox ended up making it a commercial product and selling it to the whole world.
Yes.
Sales training. So in 1979, Big Xerox, the copier giant up in Rochester, Minnesota, they had a problem that still hasn't gone away today, which is 20% of their salespeople are bringing in 80% of the revenue.
Yeah.
Right. And it was even worse than that because they had heavy pressure to grow back then. This is Big Xerox. And what's the number one growth strategy? Well, if we sold 2 billion last year, let's double the number of salespeople and we'll sell 4 billion. What could be simpler, right?
Doesn't work that
Right.
way.
Right. So anyway, so they'd end up, if Mark's a star in Toronto, you say, Mark, we need somebody to open up Vancouver. We're going to move you to Vancouver. We're going to pay for your move. And we want you to hire 8 salespeople and train them just to sell just as good as you do. And these newly promoted managers would end up crashing and burning.
Yes.
Because great salespeople, even those top 20% that bring in 80% of the business, 95% of them sell intuitively. They don't have a model. They don't have a process. So if you're a star salesperson, how do you teach other people to do what you do intuitively?
Right.
And the answer is with great difficulty, because you can't teach it if you're doing it intuitively. Process improves performance, but you've got to come up with a process. So anyway, they hired Neil Rackham, and Neil Rackham was a behavioral researcher in 1979. And they said, Neil, we don't even want you to mess with the bottom 80%. We want you and your researchers to go out and observe physical sales calls of our top 20% and see if you can find enough commonality in their behavior that we can put it into a model and teach everybody. Right? And so then they needed, after he did this research, they needed a pilot division. And at the time in 1979, Xerox Computer Services in Marina del Rey, California, we had 120 salespeople and 20 first-line managers. And since I was a chief sales trainer, I got to run the Spin pilot at Xerox Computer Services.
No way.
So we trained all our 20 managers how to go out, and record the calls and the tick marks, and then, say, David, here was the ideal call, and here's the call you just made. What do you think we need to work on? Well, it made sense, but Xerox Computer Services salespeople and sales managers hated it. And the reason they hated it is the calls were falling apart. The managers were all charged with making so many Spin observation calls a week, and then they were supposed to take those and pump them into the database and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I started going out and watching those, and what would happen is the salespeople would start doing discovery. They'd start asking all these expert discovery questions that the smartest people in our company wrote for them, and the buyers would go, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't earned the right for these questions.
Exactly. I don't trust you enough to answer these questions. I don't know you good enough to answer these questions.
Yeah.
So the discovery part was just causing him to stop. Now, back then, my diagnosis of the problem was kind of wrong, because I ended up having to explain to all our management why Spin was such a flop. even though they were using spin to train the Xerox salespeople in Rochester. And my theory at the time is Neil Rackham, all 1,500 calls he observed to build his model were selling typewriters, fax machines, and copiers. All right, now we talked about usage. Do you know how to use a copier? I do. You lift the thing up, you put the paper in, you lift it down, and you push start, right? So all the sales calls that Neil Rackham observed were for products that the buyers already knew how to use. We had a first generation MRP system, full integration, transaction processing. Our buyers had no clue what that thing did.
Nobody even knew what a computer was in the mid-70s.
Right. So the spin model assumed the buyer understood the product the seller is selling. That's a bad assumption.
So it's so interesting, Mike, first of all, to hear this history, because of course, as we know, spin has become one of the most successful sales training models in the history of sales training, because one of the main reasons was because of the size and scale and scope of those sales calls observed.
Right.
Because the number was flabbergasting for the time. And then up until recently, you would have looked at that and said, nobody else can ever analyze that number of sales calls because no company would pay for it.
Right.
And it's only recently that is interesting to note that some companies started analyzing Zoom calls like this one that we're having together, where they recorded them, analyzed them. So with big data and quantum computing, you can go through and do an AI, you can analyze what's taking place. And it's actually two people who were real big fans of Dr. Neil Rackham, Matt Dixon and a guy named Brent McKenna. They originally wrote Challenger, and Matt's latest book is called The Jolt Effect, talking about addressing the fact that a lot of decisions are going to no decision right now. So there's incredible.
They have been for 40 years, Mark. Number one competitor all my B2B clients have had for 40 years has been no decision. They lose more to no decision than any single competitor.
I always had that feeling too, Mike. But they've got some good research that they're doing now too, and actually calling it out. It's a very relevant topic, right? How do you break somebody out of no decision? But for the folks listening, I love this conversation so much for a couple of reasons. The first one is none of these challenges in professional sales are all that new.
No.
People are people. You're still trying to convince. In
our work, marketing is still screwing the whole process up.
Okay. So those of you in marketing listening, we're going to give you some love as part of this whole discussion. But you're absolutely right. So back in the day, it's demoing the earliest days of computer technology is the problem. Today, salespeople are trying, all they want to do when they're calling David Fauser, and he gets a lot of these calls. So do I. They just want to demo. Because their funnel says stage 3 is a demo. And that's a key KPI. And I got to tell my manager I got 5 demos.
That's a flawed process. Another breakthrough book for me in this whole discussion. Did you ever read Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm?
Yes, I did.
All right. Well, Jeffrey Moore pointed out that all these hot startups in the Silicon Valley, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they're just going like crazy. And if you look at it, they probably had a team of 3, some engineer, programmer, some techie, and then a sales and marketing guy and a finance guy. And if you have those 3 and they start a company, what happens is after they invent the better mousetrap, they go out and they hire people to write white papers, and then they go to trade shows and they demo. Okay? But if you think about it, when somebody responds to a demo at an early trade show, it's because they are smart enough to look at that new mousetrap and go, oh, I've been waiting for somebody like this to do this, and I'm going to buy it.
Mhm.
So what happens is they are triggering the innovators and early adopters out there. And so the innovators and early adopters see it and they buy it and they love it, and the sales take off, but the market at most has 13% innovators and early adopters. So for the rest of them who could not come up with their own vision of usage, that was the key.
Yeah, then the fast followers,
Right.
then we've,
Right.
and by the way, there's somebody we should probably get on the podcast, David, as well in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
It's funny when we have this conversation. I'll share with you, Mike and David. I was really challenged because a lot of things you're talking about, Mike, and I followed your early work, and I've been following a lot of the work of all of these sort of what I would call staple sales training methodologies, whether it's SPIN or Miller-Hyman strategic selling, or your great book, Solution Selling, Customer-Centric Selling, and what great salespeople do. All of these things I've been following for years. And I had a meeting with a friend I've got who's a professor at Harvard. You probably know him, Frank Cespedes, who's
Yes.
written 8 or 9 books.
I know of him. I don't know him personally, but I know who he is. Yeah.
Great guy, just like you, great guy. And I was sharing with him, I was saying, hey, Frank, the more I go through all of this stuff, it feels like I'm back to the future. And within the funnel, I'm struggling because I feel like everything we're teaching and coaching on got solved for 30 and 40 years ago. And there is no silver bullet. There is no brand new version. It's the same stuff. So I was coming to him saying, hey, in certain regards, I feel like I've got imposter syndrome here because I'm just applying these things I learned 20, 30 years ago. And he gave me some wonderful advice. He's a really wise fellow like yourself. And he came back and he said, hey, Mark, people haven't changed for 100 years. So he said, all you're doing is you're gathering that wisdom, but you have to package it up for today's generation in a different way, but they still need to hear the fundamentals. And he referenced for me how he was coaching, a group of entrepreneurs who were paying unreal money to be in a classroom with him, like shocking.
Yeah.
And so, but to be in a room with him. And he said at one point in time, he realized he had to go back to some Peter Drucker fundamentals from 34 years ago. And when he presented it to them, the room took off and it all resonated, but they needed to hear the latest stuff that way. And one of the things I do, Mike, no joke, in most of my public workshops, your public workshop, you just talked about 28 people. I just did one of those this morning remotely via Zoom.
Yeah.
We had 10 of David Fauser's team in there, and then 18 other people. I reference Dale Carnegie, Win Friends and Influence People, as a must read for anybody in sales. It was written in the 40s. Everybody, the same thing. Half the room will roll their eyes at me, and the other half goes, oh, that's kind of interesting, because people haven't changed in hundreds of years.
Well, if you look not just at the sales process industry, but the CRM industry, God, how much money has been wasted on all of that? And, salespeople still hate CRM. The only reason is their senior management needs the visibility, but it's not giving them value in initiating buy cycles, gaining connection, trust, all that stuff. Let me tell you another big breakthrough for me in the sales process world. In 2008, I came across at Customer-Centric Selling, we had a guest speaker, can't think of his name now, but anyway, he was doing another study of the 80-20 rule and stuff.
Yeah.
And he said, remember the 80-20 rule? It's gotten worse. It's now 87-13. In 2008, 87% of the revenue was brought in by 13% of the salespeople. And that just hit me, and I went, oh, God. And that's what caused me to go to the connection storytelling way from the sales process way. But then it hit me for probably 20 years. My primary user client was always the VP of sales.
Mhm.
He'd hire me to train salespeople. And invariably, 20 times in 20 years, one of these CSOs would call me and say, Mike, I'm really frustrated. My top 20% love solution selling, but the bottom 80% quit using it within 2 weeks of the workshop.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's what I had to figure out, because the whole deal with solution selling was, we're not going to train them with product training. We're going to get the smartest situational experts in the company to write discovery questions, both diagnostic and visioning questions, so we can train our new salespeople on doing intelligent discovery and get them productive this soon instead of this soon. And so they would hire me, and we'd go in and we'd write the pain sheets, the prompters and stuff.
Yeah.
But finally figured out, why did they quit using it within 20 weeks of the workshop? Because they go out on a call, and you remember, the bottom 80% of humanity don't connect well with strangers.
Ah.
It's not just salespeople, it's teachers, it's guys and girls in college, it's politicians, it's executives, but most human beings don't intuitively, easily, comfortably connect with strangers.
Ah.
And the real difference between the top 20% that Neil Rackham was studying and the bottom 80% is that intuitive ability to emotionally connect and build trust. It's not their IQs, it's not how many hours they work, it's not how many proposals they do or demos or presentations. It's how they connect and build trust intuitively. Because, remember, the number one sales productivity problem for the last 40 years is still first-line managers have no clue how to coach salespeople.
Yeah.
And all they can do is say, here, go out and watch me make this call. That's about all they can do. Or they'll get them to go out and shake the trees, and then they go out as the chief closer.
Yeah.
But the real difficulty here is teaching people to behave in a way that gets them business, even though their natural wiring isn't to behave, to connect.
And how do we?
If you think about all the really smart people I've trained over the years who have 150 IQs, who are chemical engineers, financial planners, software engineers, all kinds of geeks and stuff, they typically, stereotypically speaking, have connection difficulties. So now, if you look at one of these salespeople that quit using solution selling at 2 weeks after the workshop, the reason is they go out to make a new call with a new buyer, and since they're uncomfortable connecting, what do they start? They go to their discovery questions prematurely. These beautifully written, smart, brilliant discovery questions. But then because they didn't connect, so they skipped the connection piece, went to the discovery questions, and the buyers would go, ooh, you don't know me well enough. That's why challengers struggled so much, is they were assuming the seller had enough connection and trust that they could ask challenging questions. But most of them hadn't earned the right.
I think the other part, Mike, was to the emotional intelligence. If, it's starting to resonate with me, that 80%, but if you can't make a connection and your emotional intelligence is low, people took Challenger and maybe started asking or having a point of view too abruptly.
Challenging.
And you're pissing off clients.
And 80% of all human beings are low enough on EQ that they would struggle in sales.
So how do we help them with that, by the way? If you were coaching a group of that 80%, what would be some of thoughts that they should be taking away to try and improve their ability to connect with somebody, to engage with somebody when it's not in their natural behavioral tendency?
That's a great question. And that's what our whole story seekers business is. And it's what great salespeople do. And what great salespeople do is the secret for making all those other processes work, because the vast majority of the rest of them aren't working only because of EQ problems. Not because the process is bad, it's because the buyers don't trust them enough to answer those questions. It's overcoming discovery resistance. If you send me your email, or if you just go to storyseekers.us, there's a white paper I wrote out there on discovery resistance. But discovery resistance is what we have to teach anybody who wants to connect, whether you're a salesperson. Well, what if you're a leader? How many times have you seen a corporate leader up in front of an annual meeting and you all know he or she's lost the room?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've lost the room. Everybody's doing their phones and bullshitting and whatever. They've lost the room. That's an EQ problem too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So by the way, team, everybody, all of the websites, the connection points, they'll all be in the show notes. And at the end of this, in a few minutes, we're going to ask Mike to run over a couple of those again. But story seekers, a lot of this is really resonating to me in terms of building that engagement. How does it sound to you, David?
Yeah, I got to confirm, Mike, I was on your website as well, just looking at some of your blogs and reading them. And one of the things that really struck me as fascinating is your wife as a couples therapist. And I was just so curious to think, like, what have you been able to bring from that over to the sales side? Because it sounds to me like when you're talking about relationships, you're talking about shame, you're talking about all these things that couples face. It's sort of reminded me of sales a little bit. Have you been able to sort of make that connection?
Yeah, we've had some amazing collaboration. But one of the real keys, and it's not as obvious, but the 3 story sale skills are building a story where you've got the components of a setting, a struggle, an aha, an insight, and an outcome deliverable just with bullets and keywords in less than 60 seconds.
Okay.
So you have to be able to build a story, then tell it in 60 seconds. But then what I ended up doing intuitively back in 1974, where after I gave you my 1-minute materials manager story, I'd say, Mark, enough about me, what's going on here? And then for the next 45 minutes, I tend your story. And so what I have to do is start gathering nuggets and putting them into the narrative stories that are going to help you buy. Okay.
Love it.
So that's storytending. And that's the part Jennifer brought to Story Seekers. And we started teaching story in 2008. We in sales could teach you how to build them and tell them, but we didn't really know how to tend the stories.
Oh, it's great.
It's not just tending the facts. Anybody can tend facts. Oh, how many employees? How long have you been in business? It's tending facts is easy. But if I say, so what's going on around here, Mark? And you say, well, I'm struggling a little with those shortages. Okay, now what you did is you just revealed an emotion, a struggle, a shame or something. And the storytending skill is, tell me about that struggle. And you start peeling the onion. Anytime they give you a clue of an underlying feeling, emotion, you start peeling that. And by peeling it, and so I might tend your story for 30 minutes. And then before I leave, I would just say, let me just see if I've got this straight, Mark. here's the setting, here's the struggle, here's this, there's that. Do I get you?
Mm.
One of two things. Yes, you did, or you got most of it, but you missed a little. Okay. But once your buyer says, you got me, and once your romantic partner says, yes, you got me. So it's the ability to tend another human being's feelings, emotions, wounds, triggers, as they dribble them out without over pressuring them or over discovering them.
Without making you the hero of the story as a salesperson. Let me tell you about my company and what we do. Now you're making the whole story is about them. They're the hero.
Yeah.
With the challenge and the better outcome at the end. Every movie's the same. Hero, challenge, succeed, get to the end.
And most of the movie is the struggle.
Right.
And so when you tell somebody else a story, like I told that story, even though it was only 60 seconds, it was a struggle. He'd come in the morning and the CFO was waiting for him at his desk. The VP of manufacturing was publicly shaming him because he was late. You know, putting that emotional struggle out there. That's the real meat of.
And they can connect.
So and then when I play it back and said, did I get you? When you said, yes, you got me. Now we have a connection.
Yeah. We're in a
And
different
now I
situation.
can take out whatever sales process you want me to, to do. Use these discovery stuff or, but you cannot get into that process stuff until you've got trust and connection. You can't.
By the way, for everybody listening, of course, when your clients and prospects go quiet on you, we never made that connection.
Mm-mm.
Because all those people in my life who support this way, Mike, when they get me, I'm never not returning a call. Might not be immediately the same day, but I'm never going quiet on them. Once they've helped me a certain way, I am never going quiet on them.
And what you just did, that you just gave me is a public display of trust. And that's one of the things we start making lists with salespeople. Public displays of trust are when you leave them a voice message and 7 minutes later they call you back. That's a public display of trust.
Right.
When
Mark,
they trust you enough to admit their pain to you, that's the huge public display of trust. I mean, when salespeople call you at night, you say, oh, God, Mark, I'm so glad you called. I've been sitting here hoping somebody would try and sell me some new internet connections. When they admit a problem. So that's what, if your story triggers emotional conclusions, if I tell you a 60-second story and at the end of 60 seconds, you say to yourself, well, gee, even though this guy's 20 years younger than me, it sounds like he really understands how hard my job is.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he's helped one of my peers already solve a problem I haven't figured out how to solve yet. And so when he passes the torch to me and says, what's going on around here? I'm forthcoming.
Yeah. That's a great way of trying to get to that level of trusted advisor, right? So you've got through that gate. Trust.
You're way ahead of being an advisor. An advisor might be 30 or 60 minutes down the road, but after 60 seconds to say enough about me, what's going on here, you're a long ways from trusted advisors. Kind of sounds like a logical decision. This is more emotional conclusions.
Mm-hmm. It's great stuff, Mike.
Yeah.
Listen, we have to respect your time. And boy, I'm just looking at the clock. I can't believe we're 53 minutes into this conversation.
Well, Mark, I was going to jump in here. Like, I feel like we didn't even really get out of the 70s here with Mike. Like, I think we got to have him back on.
Do it again. I'm retired. So.
We're doing this again. So
no, we have to. Yeah, I love this conversation, Mike. I mean, I just love it so much. I mean, I just have a way of really connecting with me as a VP of sales and just thinking about, boy, how could we do this? Because I actually see it as making our salespeople's jobs easier just by focusing on this connection. That's what I'm really getting
Not
out of it.
only that, but can I give you another huge benefit?
Please.
When we do Story Seekers workshops, night 2 homework at the end of the day, because now we've taught them storytending, is you have to, between when we break class today at 5 in the afternoon and when we start tomorrow morning, call the person who in theory, call someone you love or who loves you. In theory, your romantic partner, but it could be a parent or a child, someone you love. And we teach them to get that person on the phone and say, Mark, refresh my memory of that first time you met our mutual friend, and what struck you. And then, in other words, tend a story of someone that loves you and that you love. Okay, so that's their homework assignment. And then at the end of 30 minutes, do a polite exit and summarize it. I got to get back, meet some friends for dinner, but let me just summarize what I just learned. Yes. Do I get you? Did I understand your day? It's magic.
Great practice. One exception, Mike. Nobody loves me. David knows why. So we may have to do some work just finding a reasonable substitute for that.
I got the feeling that David does love you, actually.
But
on my screen, I'm between the two of you, and I can feel the love coming in both directions.
The next podcast will explain why. It's just good judgment that nobody loves. I'm just joking, Doina. I know you love me. So, Mike, thank you. What an absolute joy chatting with you today. By the way, the learning is free flowing. David and I have to have you back. But in the short term, when the folks who've heard this podcast want to learn more about you or Story Seekers, where can they go?
Well, the easiest website is storyseekers.us.
.us.
Yeah, and if you want to improve your romantic relationships, weconcile.com.
Weconcile.com
is the system that my wife wrote, where it's a therapist in your pocket. And
nice.
Hang on to your hat. Wait till we dive into that sometime. It's really amazing stuff.
I wonder if maybe next time, David, we don't have Jennifer on with Mike.
Yeah, sounds great.
Wouldn't that be kind of an interesting conversation if she might be open to it, Mike?
Well, I tell you, I have the secret to I have a happier relationship than I ever thought I was possible. And it's because I was smart enough to marry a couples therapist.
By the way, I have a feeling all three of us were very lucky with the people we married. Yeah. And so that's probably why
I'm on my second one, my first one. Ooh, I couldn't.
That's the third podcast. The third podcast will be that. Guys, it's been a super pleasure today. David,
right.
Always so great to have you on these, David. And thank you, Mike. And thank you, listeners, again for today. As always with the Selling Well, we do this so we can help improve the performance and professionalism of sales, but also improve the lives of salespeople. And so we're continually striving to get better. We appreciate you listening today. And if you heard something today that resonated, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast. And if we can improve this podcast, please remember we're growth oriented and we love constructive criticism. Please send your notes to me personally at markcox@inthefunnel.com. That's my personal email. I check those, and we'd love to hear of ways we can continue to improve this for you, the listener. But thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time on The Selling Well.